Hi, folks. Thanks for joining in today. A gentle trigger warning here, please. Today's episode has some mentions of suicide. So, if that is a triggering topic for you, please feel free to skip this one, practice self care. And if you do need to reach out to someone, if you are in Canada, please call or text 988 and you will be provided support. If you are outside of Canada, please take a pause, check in with yourself, and connect with your local crisis resources if needed. Thanks, everyone. Hi, everyone. This is part 2 of my conversation on international students in Canada with Rohama and Angie from Shanti Psychotherapy. If you have not listened to part 1, please pause this. Go ahead and listen to that one. It's really important that you follow that order. Thanks so much for being here, and let's get into part 2. Shanti has been doing a lot of work with and for international students as well, and you provide reduced cost therapy to international students as well. I'm curious, what are some mental health trends and considerations that are unique to this population that you've seen in your work, well, even professional work or personal lives?
I think with international students, like one of the biggest things that I've noticed with my clients is them not being aware of the mental health coverage they have. And
Mm.
that's what we are really focusing on at Shanti is providing students that come to us or even students that we go to in the outreach work that they do, lists of resources that they are covered for because they pay such high um, insurance fees, but they don't know what it covers. I've had clients come to me from universities and colleges, and they have no idea that they're covered for $500, $1,000 a year. And so they've been living with, their isolation, their stress, their anxiety, their academic pressure, their guilt that comes from being an international student. It's so big. And they suffer through that for years until they finally are, in their last year of university or college and they have looked to the resources because the threshold has been crossed. And
Mm.
that's when they find out because the universities don't tell them and the
Mm.
colleges don't tell them. And
And
that's been
that's
a
so
lot of our
curious
work.
to me. That's so curious to me. Like, why not? Like, even, there's, when I look at systems, we typically see really well-intentioned people trying to work within the resources that are available. And I just recently had a discussion with um, one of the faculty members at a college who was saying, she struggles with feeling like a therapist to a lot of the students because there's just not those resources that are there. The International Student Office again is really focused on visas and forms and
Mm.
but what about the messages about the academic support? Like there is academic support on campus for free. There is the health center on campus for free. You have insurance to help you, receive dental care, psychotherapy, physiotherapy, just again, factors that support health and wellness, where we know with stress, and there's no way that the experience of acculturation isn't stressful.
Mhm.
We also need to look at neurobiology that the students are coming and they're still in the developmental phase of life.
Mhm.
So they're wired for stress and dysregulation. And then
Mhm.
we layer on this very significant experience with lack of preparation. We need to support them to know where they can get resources to deal with that, to know that it's not uncommon. And in fact, it's more uncommon to not struggle than to struggle. That's what's normal.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and as you say that, I also wonder how much of well, how important this is because the resources available to them really needs to be at the forefront of their knowledge because a lot of South Asian folks, like as a population, we're also very not proactive with our health, right? We can be very reactive. And it can take a lot more for us to engage in, say, like regular dental checkups, because maybe that's just something we didn't grow up that was very prioritized. And so for some of us, it may take a little bit more of a push to actually engage in the resources, but we're extremely unlikely to do that if we don't even know what exists for us.
Absolutely. And I think already we know that within the South Asian population, we have so much stigma around mental health resources, around
Mhm.
support in general. And I think with university students, and I say this, you know, I not to generalize, but to talk about my own experiences, when I was in university, I did not know that I had mental health coverage.
Mhm.
I knew that I had health insurance and I knew I had dental insurance because I saw how much I paid for it on my tuition, but I did not know that I was covered for mental health resources until I had left and I got into the work that I'm doing. And if I had known that, it would have changed my university experience. It would have created so much ease for me. For a lot of international students, when something happens and they need financial support, universities and colleges cannot offer them anything. But what they can offer them is other resources that they're covered, such as mental health insurance, such as social supports on campus. But they just say there's nothing we can do for you.
Mm.
And then we wonder why suicide rates are so high, why isolation is so high. And a lot of times students can also be in universities that don't have a large number of international students. So there's no affinity. There's no,
Mm.
none of your friends are going through the same experience as you. I was really lucky in the sense that I had so many friends around me that were also international students. So if I didn't know something, someone else knew something, and we were able to guide each other.
Mm.
But what happens when you don't have that and you're completely by yourself? It
Mm.
is so incredibly difficult to even imagine what that would be like.
Yeah, I would imagine the isolation piece is huge. And then that stress of acculturation, right? Navigating a whole new system, a whole new country by yourself. And especially if you're coming at the age of like 18, 19, 20, that's a really tender age.
Yeah, for sure. And instead of compassion, empathy, unfortunately, the culture that we're surrounded by is based on inferiority and othering, when really there should be more of a focus just on an individual level of having more empathy and compassion for people that are going through a different experience than you.
Yeah.
And how quick and easy it is for us to point fingers when really that does more harm.
Mm.
Which will be, when because our own economy is so stressed right now.
Exactly.
Inflation, we're struggling financially.
Mm.
Most families, most people, right? We have a housing,
Crisis,
I
yeah.
would say it's a crisis in Toronto. When I was a social worker 10 years ago, subsidized housing, the wait list was 10 years long,
Mm.
budged much.
Mhm.
So, we're going to see that. That's why I keep going back to that preparation. Like even, talking to parents as they prepare to send their children off, what is it that you need to know or get informed about? I
Mhm.
used to laugh at my dad a bit because he used to always complain, I got to get my food every day. Yeah, you have to get your food every day. And he would sort of like joking, but it was a bit of a perseveration all through my childhood and even, well into his retirement years. And then as I started to learn more about him, it was the trauma of
Mm.
his acculturation that was stuck. He'd left at 17 and his mother loved him through food. And in our culture, we love through food, right?
Mm.
And it was so traumatic for him trying to find what he needed for groceries, how to cook it. He said he lived on bread and a char for like, and then discovered how to cook an egg. And that was his diet for like a year.
Mm.
So, I think about that when how do we kind of start to educate? That's why platforms like this, Nikita, we do a lot on socials because it's ways like these little sound bites of information to get families thinking more, how
Mhm.
to get schools thinking more. Um, it's been difficult relationship building in India because I think there is to address these issues means that it bursts that bubble
Mhm.
of the fantastic, amazing life you're going to have studying abroad, which it will be. That's so exciting. And can we prepare for the challenges and how to learn how to support, you know, your children as they go away? What do you need to be looking out for? How do you talk to them differently to be there for them to prevent mental health issues? And how to support if and when that does hit.
Mhm. Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you, this solution is quite like layered, right? There's systemic resources needed on a systemic level, and on the individual level, us perhaps like looking in and questioning some of our prejudices and biases and exploring, yeah, this like how can I support this person who's going abroad, right? What is this going to look like? And how can we be a little bit more compassionate and gentle with this population, right? That is already here.
What Angie just said about what her dad used to say is something that I used to say. Oh,
Really, Rohama?
not too short of like 4 years ago. And
Yeah,
that was in the 60s. And this is right now. And
yeah,
we're saying the same things as international students.
yeah.
And I think that in itself is such a big indicator of all of the work that we should have done by now.
Mm,
Um, but life looks very different for people in um South Asia, like in terms of daily tasks, in terms of food, in terms of doing things that might be so simple to people here, like laundry, and the accessibility to resources back home is immaculate, right? Because of the ease of access, because of the cost, because of all of those things. And then when you move here, even if you're coming from a working class background or a low middle class background, you're still seeing the shift in the way you have to live your life. And I think it takes years as students to let go of that. And that stays with us forever.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be part of our experience always.
And you know what I thought, what popped into my mind when I was listening to you talk about that just now was resilience.
Yeah,
Look
absolutely.
how, like, it's about how do we support this resilience? Like, I think it's the bravest thing to leave your home country, everything that you know, and try to set up somewhere else at 18. Like, I moved an hour away and I felt like that was like, I moved to Waterloo when I went to university. That was 1 hour. And it felt like I'd gone to another planet. So I think we also
Yeah.
have to bring that into the, highlight that piece. Like if you know that it doesn't take away your resilience, how brave and courageous you are, that spark that you have inside of yourself to, educate, develop yourself, be in a different culture and envelop in that, and that it's normal to struggle. Like, how do we
Yeah.
lighten that up a bit,
mm,
right? Because right now those barriers are really strong around, as you said, what's stuck.
mm,
Don't
Absolutely.
get stuck in that preparation is, I think, burst the bubble. And I think that would impact all economies, right?
mm,
It would. If we burst that
Absolutely.
bubble and present it more realistic, it it changes things. It changes that system. Systems are designed not to change.
Yeah, and what you just said, along with what Nikita had asked a little bit about mental health concerns in international students, what Angie just said really stuck out to me because a large part of why international students, I think, don't access resources, and this is a personal and shared experience, is the sheer amount of guilt
mhm,
that a lot of students feel for like leaving their families behind, leaving their life behind. And the ability to seek resources can make you feel weak and it can make you feel like
mhm,
you're doing something wrong. And if all of these people are able to handle it, I should be able to handle it.
mhm,
And the cycle of guilt, especially for international students, is so incredibly strong. It is the lived experience of every international student that I've ever spoken to because you're constantly surviving.
mm,
And now my friends and I talk about this. We're in our late 20s and we feel like we're just getting out of that survival mode.
mm,
And that creates a lot of delayed adulting. Like I
mm,
feel like I'm stuck in the headspace of being an international student and I'm almost 30. Like it takes a really long time to get out of that space and to really allow yourself to leave survival mode and start to adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that piece. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really valuable and that's really well said. And I really hope that this conversation today bursts the bubble for a lot of folks around fiction, around international students. It certainly gave me quite a bit of things to think about. And I mean, this is a conversation that needs to be had like on the regular, and hopefully folks walking away from this episode can question some of their own beliefs, and as some of these negative beliefs and opinions are perpetuated in their groups and in their communities, they can maybe poke holes in it a little bit or question it a little bit more, right? You don't have to be an advocate for international students if that doesn't feel right to you right now, but can we poke some holes that, oh, okay, like this happened, this carjacking happened. Do we know how many of these are international students? Are there stats on this? Or is this just a story, a community story? Right. But I really appreciate the two of you coming on here and sharing your thoughts. This was really lovely chatting with the two of you, and you're doing some really lovely work with international students. I will have Rohama's and Angie's information down below if you want to check out Shanti's socials. They have a huge focus on international students. And if you have been listening to this on Spotify, there's a Q&A section at the bottom. And if you're on YouTube, the comment section is there for you. Let us know if you have any thoughts, any comments, any questions about this, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much for being here today, you guys.
Yeah, thank you for the space to talk about this. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Nikita. You're always bringing forward some really important topics for our community.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay tuned for our disclaimer for today. The guest and the host of Brown People Problems do not offer individualized therapeutic or medical advice, and our conversations should not be interpreted as such. This podcast is not a replacement for therapy. This podcast exists for educational purposes only. Please consider your circumstances and engage with the content mindfully.